She was a ruthless CEO who tracked every single penny. He was the quiet cleaner she suspected of stealing company time. But when an undercover boss sees a black single-dad cleaner stay 3 hours after close, then discovers why, the secret she found hidden in a dark supply closet didn't just get him fired, it changed her entire life. Have you ever judged someone before knowing the battle they were fighting? We all think we know what hard work looks like. We see a man lingering after his shift or loitering in a warm building, and we assume he's lazy. We assume he's taking advantage of the system. But sometimes what looks like a crime is actually a desperate attempt at survival. Tessa Caldwell waited in the dark that night, ready to catch him red-handed. She expected to find a thief. She expected to find stolen equipment or a man sleeping on the job. But when that closet door finally cracked open, she didn't find a criminal. She found a heartbreaking secret that would bring a powerful CEO to her knees. This is a story about a father's love, a broken system, and the freezing cold night that changed everything. You're watching True Black Tales. If you've ever felt like the world was against you, but you kept fighting for your family anyway, this story is for you. The 42nd floor of the Caldwell Marketing Group was usually a hive of activity. Phones ringing, heels clicking on marble floors, the hum of servers and espresso machines. But at 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in late November, the office began its nightly transformation into a ghost town. Outside, the Seattle skyline was crisp and clear, but brutally cold. The temperature had already dropped to 28 degrees, and the wind was howling off the Puget Sound, rattling the heavy glass panes of the skyscrapers. It was the kind of cold that hurt to breathe, a dry, biting freeze that seeped through coats and settled into your bones. Tessa Caldwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in her corner office, watching the city lights flicker on below. At 32, Tessa was a force of nature. She hadn't inherited this company. She had bought it. She was known in the industry as the fixer. When a company was bleeding money, Tessa swooped in, cauterized the wound, and made it profitable again. She was efficient. She was brilliant. And she was utterly unsentimental. 3 weeks ago, she had acquired this firm. Her first move was to audit the payroll. She went through every line item with a fine-tooth comb. Expensive coffee vendors? Gone. Redundant middle management? Severance packages were already in the mail. Then, she got to the custodial contract. It was a standard contract with a third-party agency, but something in the digital logs caught her eye. The lead night cleaner, a man named Donovan Banks, was badging into the building at 5 p.m. and badging out at midnight. The problem? His shift ended at 9 p.m. Every single night for the past 3 weeks, this man was staying in her building for 3 extra hours. Tessa wasn't paying him overtime. The contract was a flat rate, but the liability was a nightmare. What was he doing for 3 hours alone in a high-end office filled with expensive Apple computers and sensitive client data? Was he stealing supplies? Was he running a side business using her bandwidth? Was he sleeping on the expensive sofas in the lobby? Tessa didn't like mysteries, and she certainly didn't like people taking advantage of her assets. So tonight, she decided to catch him. She didn't tell security. She didn't tell her assistant. At 5:45 p.m., instead of going down to the parking garage to her heated Mercedes, Tessa went into the IT storage room. She swapped her Italian blazer for a generic gray hoodie she found in the Lost and Found. She let her hair down, put on a pair of reading glasses, and slipped into a cubicle in the back corner of the office, a blind spot she knew most people ignored. She sat in the dark, the only light coming from the dimmed screen of her laptop and the amber glow of the street lamps far below. The office was silent, save for the rhythmic thump-thump of the ventilation system. At 6 p.m. sharp, the double doors at the main entrance pushed open. Donovan Banks walked in. Tessa watched him through the gap between 2 file cabinets. He was a tall man, perhaps in his mid-30s, with broad shoulders that seemed to carry an invisible weight. He wore the standard blue uniform of the cleaning agency, but unlike most of the crew she had seen over the years, his uniform was immaculate, pressed, tucked in. He pushed a large yellow cleaning cart, the wheels squeaking softly against the carpet. Tessa narrowed her eyes. "Okay, Donovan," she thought, "show me what you're up to." For the next 2 hours, Tessa watched. She expected him to cut corners. She expected him to skim the trash cans, ignore the dusting, and find a place to lounge. But Donovan didn't slack off. In fact, he worked with a level of precision that was almost unsettling. When he reached the reception area, he didn't just vacuum around the heavy potted ficus plants. He stopped, put down the vacuum, and physically moved the heavy pots to clean the dust accumulating behind them. When he wiped down the glass walls of the conference room, he sprayed the cleaner, wiped it, stepped back to check for streaks in the light, and then wiped it again. He worked in silence. No headphones, no phone calls, just a man and his work, moving with a steady, rhythmic exhaustion. By 8:45 p.m., the office was spotless. The air smelled of lemon disinfectant and static electricity. Tessa checked her watch. This was it. His shift was technically over in 15 minutes. This was the moment he would make his move. This was when the theft would happen. Donovan pushed his cart toward the utility closet at the far end of the hallway. He parked it neatly, but he didn't head for the exit elevators. Instead, he walked over to the wall-mounted thermostat near the break room. Tessa held her breath. Donovan stood in front of the small digital screen. He stared at it for a long moment, his hand hovering in the air. He looked around, checking the hallway, checking the ceiling cameras. He looked nervous. "Here we go," Tessa thought, her finger hovering over the record button on her phone. Donovan reached out and pressed the up arrow. Once, twice, 3 times. He moved the temperature from the corporate standard of 68 degrees to 72. It was a small change, a petty change, Tessa thought. Why risk your job to make the empty office 4 degrees warmer? Then Donovan did something even stranger. He walked into the break room and went straight for the filtered water cooler. He took a plastic water bottle from his pocket, a crumpled, reused disposable bottle, and filled it to the brim. He capped it, took a deep breath, and rubbed his face with both hands. In the pale light of the break room, Tessa saw how tired he truly looked. There were deep, dark circles under his eyes. His hands were ash-colored and dry, the skin around his knuckles cracked from the cold and the chemicals. He walked out of the break room and headed straight for the large supply closet at the very end of the hall. It was a room meant for storing bulk paper towels, cases of soap, and broken office chairs. It was windowless and barely 6 feet by 6 feet. Donovan opened the door gently, as if he were entering a church, and slipped inside. The door clicked shut, but not all the way. He left it cracked open an inch. Tessa waited. 5 minutes passed. The silence of the office returned, heavier than before. 10 minutes passed. He's sleeping, Tessa told herself. He's clocking 3 hours of overtime to take a nap in a warm closet while I pay the bill. The anger flared in her chest. She had worked 18-hour days to buy this company. She had sacrificed her social life, her relationships, and her sleep to be successful. She had zero tolerance for laziness. She stood up from her hiding spot. Her legs were stiff from sitting for 3 hours. She smoothed down her hoodie, put on her boss face, and began to march across the office floor. She was going to throw that door open. She was going to demand an explanation, and then she was going to call the cleaning agency and have him removed from the building permanently. Her sneakers made no sound on the plush carpet. She reached the door, her hand extended toward the handle. But just as her fingers brushed the cold metal, a sound stopped her dead in her tracks. It was a voice. Not Donovan's deep baritone. It was a small, high-pitched whisper. "Daddy, is the wind gone yet?" Tessa froze, her heart hammered against her ribs. A child? She leaned closer to the crack in the door. "Not yet, Trey," Donovan's voice replied, soft and soothing, a stark contrast to the silence of the empty building. The wind is still howling out there. It's biting cold tonight. "Is the car still an icebox?" the small voice asked. Tessa heard the sound of fabric rustling, like a coat being zipped up. "Yeah, buddy," Donovan whispered. "The car is still an icebox. But you're warm now, right?" "Yeah, I'm warm." Tessa stepped back into the shadows of a large multifunction printer just as the closet door pushed open. Donovan emerged, but he wasn't alone. Holding his hand was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. He was a small thing, with big, curious eyes and a head full of twists. He was wearing a thick, puffy winter coat that looked 2 sizes too big for him, a knit beanie pulled down low over his ears, and a backpack that looked heavy. They weren't stealing office supplies. They weren't looting the server room. Donovan looked left, then right, scanning the hallway with the hypervigilance of a man who is used to being hunted. "Coast is clear," Donovan whispered. "Come on, let's stretch your legs." Tessa stepped pressed flat against the dark machine, her mind racing. What is happening? Donovan led the boy toward the break room. The little boy walked stiffly, his legs likely cramped from sitting in a tiny supply closet for 3 hours while his father cleaned. Tessa moved carefully to a vantage point where she could see through the glass partition of the break room. Donovan lifted the boy onto one of the high stools. He opened the yellow cleaning cart, but he didn't pull out cleaning spray. He pulled out a single, small Tupperware container. He popped the lid. Inside was pasta. Plain, white pasta shells. No sauce, no meat. Just noodles that looked like they had been tossed in a little butter. Donovan slid the container in front of the boy and handed him a plastic fork. "Eat up, Trey," Donovan said, forcing a smile. "I know it's boring in there." "I read my comic book 3 times, Trey said, digging a fork into the cold pasta. He took a bite, then stopped. He looked up at his father. "Where's your bowl, Dad?" Tessa watched Donovan's face. She saw the flinch. She saw the swallow. "I had a big lunch before I came in," Donovan lied. His voice was steady, but Tessa had been watching him since 6 p.m. He hadn't eaten a thing. He hadn't even taken a break. "Are you sure, Dad?" Trey asked, holding the fork out. "We can share." "No, you need it," Donovan said, gently pushing the boy's hand back. "You're growing. I'm full, I promise." Donovan reached out and took the boy's free hand. He began to rub it between his own rough palms, generating friction, trying to push warmth into the small fingers. "Your hands are still cold," Donovan murmured. "Eat. The heat in here will help."
"Dad?" "Yeah, Trey?" "Why can't we go to the shelter tonight, the one with the soup?" Donovan sighed. It was a sound so heavy it seemed to vibrate through the glass. "Because they're full, Trey. And the one that isn't full, they have a rule." "What rule?" "They don't let boys your age stay with their dads in the family section. They'd make you sleep in the kids' dorm and me in the men's dorm, and I'm not leaving you alone. Not with all those strangers." "So we have to sleep in the fort again?" Trey asked. His voice wasn't complaining, it was just resigned. A 7-year-old accepting a harsh reality. "Just for a few more days," Donovan said, his voice cracking slightly. "I promise, just until Friday." Tessa felt the floor drop out from under her. The pieces slammed together in her mind. The late hours, the meticulous cleaning, the thermostat, the supply closet. He wasn't stealing time, he was stealing warmth. He was staying 3 hours past his shift because outside in the parking lot sat a car that was essentially a freezer. He was keeping his son inside the building for as long as he possibly could, soaking up the 72-degree air, feeding him in a brightly lit room just to delay the inevitable moment when they would have to walk out into the 28-degree night. Tessa looked at the Tupperware container. She looked at the father rubbing his son's frozen hands. Suddenly, her investigation felt small. Her anger felt petty. She was worried about a few dollars in electricity, while this man was worried about his son freezing to death. Tessa knew she couldn't stay hidden. She couldn't just watch this. She stepped out from behind the printer. "I want to pause here for just a second. We just witnessed a father, Donovan, lying to his son about being hungry, starving himself just so his little boy could have a full meal.
That is a level of sacrifice that breaks your heart, but it also shows the incredible strength of a parent's love. There are fathers out there right now working 2 jobs, skipping meals and swallowing their pride, all to make sure their children have a shot at a better life. If you respect fathers who put their children first, no matter the cost, please hit that like button right now. Let's show some love for the silent heroes doing whatever it takes to protect their families. And if you're new here, welcome to the family. Let's get back to the story, because what happens next is going to change everything for Donovan and Trey. Tessa cleared her throat. "Excuse me." The sound cut through the quiet break room like a gunshot. Donovan spun around in his chair so fast he nearly tipped it over. In a split second, he was on his feet, stepping in front of Trey, shielding the boy with his own body. His eyes were wide, filled with a primal, terrified panic. He didn't see a woman in a hoodie. He saw a threat. He saw the authority that could take his son away. I didn't know anyone was here," Donovan stammered, his hands trembling as he held them up in surrender. "Ma'am, Look, he's not touching anything. He's just sitting. I'm doing my work. I swear, the office is clean." Trey peeked out from behind his father's leg, clutching his fork, his eyes wide with fear. Tessa raised her hands, palms open, trying to show she wasn't a threat, but she knew how she looked. She had the walk of a boss, even in sneakers. "Donovan, stop," Tessa said, her voice firm but shaking with emotion. "You aren't in trouble." Donovan blinked, confused. He squinted at her. He recognized her face from the company website, or maybe just from the way she carried herself. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm Tessa Caldwell," she said softly. "I own the building." The color drained from Donovan's face completely. He looked as if he had been punched in the gut. He gripped the back of the chair to steady himself. "Miss Caldwell," he choked out. "Oh God, please, I can explain. Please don't fire the agency. If you fire the agency, they'll blackball me. I won't get work anywhere else." He turned frantically to his son. "Trey, pack up. Now, put the lid on. Let's go." "Dad?" Trey whispered, scared by his father's panic. "Pack it up, Trey. We have to go. We're leaving." Donovan began shoving the Tupperware into the yellow bag on his cart, his movements jerky and desperate. "We'll go, Miss Caldwell. We're gone. You won't see us again." "Donovan, no," Tessa said, stepping into the break room. She moved quickly, placing a hand on the table. "Stop packing. You are not leaving." Donovan froze, his hand halfway to his son's backpack. He looked at Tessa, searching her face for malice, for the anger he was used to seeing from supervisors. But he didn't see anger. He saw tears standing in her eyes. "Sit down," Tessa said. It wasn't an order, it was a plea. "Please, both of you, sit down." Donovan hesitated. He looked at the door, calculating if he could make a run for it. But the cold reality of the night outside weighed on him. He looked at Trey, who was shivering slightly despite the warmth of the room. Slowly, warily, Donovan sat back down. But he kept one arm wrapped around Trey's shoulders, pulling him close. "Why?" Tessa asked. She gestured to the backpack, the heavy coats, the cleaning cart. "I need to understand, Donovan. Why are you here? Why is your son in a supply closet?" Donovan looked at the floor. The pride that kept him upright during the day, the professional mask he wore while scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans, finally crumbled. "I didn't have a choice," he whispered. "Tell me," Tessa said, pulling out a chair and sitting opposite them. Donovan took a shaky breath. He stared at his rough hands. "My wife, Alicia," he began. His voice caught on the name, a fresh wound. "She passed away 6 months ago." Tessa's hand went to her mouth. "I'm so sorry." It was out of nowhere. Aneurysm. 1 minute she was laughing at a TV show. The next, she was gone. Just gone. He paused, collecting himself for his son's sake. "Alicia was the planner. She had the steady job with the health insurance. I was working freelance construction. When she passed, everything stopped. The income stopped, but the bills didn't. Donovan looked up at Tessa, his eyes pleading for understanding. The funeral costs, the medical bills from the ambulance, the debt just ate everything we had. I tried to keep up. I really did. But the grief? Some days I couldn't get out of bed. I missed work. I lost contracts. He stroked the top of Trey's head. We lost the apartment 2 months ago. The landlord gave us 2 weeks, but we had nowhere to go. So, you've been on the street? Tessa asked, her voice barely a whisper. We have a car, Donovan said, a hint of defensive pride in his voice. An old Ford Taurus. It's tight, but it's dry. We park it in the Walmart lot or down by the industrial park where the security guards turn a blind eye. And the heater? Tessa asked. Donovan flinched. The heater core blew last week. I took it to the mechanic. He wants $400 for the part and the labor. I have $50 to my name until I get paid on Friday. He looked toward the window, where the black night pressed against the glass. It's 28 degrees out there tonight, Miss Caldwell. The wind chill makes it feel like 10. If I take him to the shelter, like I said, they separate us. I can't leave him alone in a room full of strangers. He's traumatized enough losing his mom. Donovan's voice dropped to a whisper, fierce and desperate. So yes, I steal time. I clock out, but I stay. I clean things that don't need cleaning. I wipe the baseboards. I polish the brass. I do whatever I can to stretch the time until midnight when the building security does their final sweep. I just want him to be warm for 3 extra hours. If his core temperature is up, he sleeps better in the car. He doesn't wake up crying from the cold. Tessa looked at Trey. The boy had put down his fork and was holding his father's hand with both of his small ones. My dad is the best cleaner, Trey said softly, looking at Tessa. Look at the floor. It shines. Tears spilled over Tessa's cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She thought about her own complaints earlier that day. She had snapped at her assistant because her latte was lukewarm. She had been annoyed that the Wi-Fi was lagging during a video call. Small, stupid, insignificant inconveniences. And here was a man, a father, who was turning the thermostat up 4 degrees and risking his livelihood just to keep his son from freezing. You're right, Trey, Tessa said, her voice trembling. It does shine. It's the cleanest floor I've ever seen. She looked at Donovan. The suspicion was gone. The undercover boss persona was gone. All that was left was human being looking at another human being who was drowning. You aren't sleeping in a car tonight, Donovan stiffened. Miss Caldwell, I'm not asking for charity. I told you this because I didn't want you to think I was a thief. I work hard. I just need to keep this job. Please. You have the job, Donovan, Tessa said firmly. In fact, you're the only person in this building who seems to care if the work is done right. But hear me clearly. You are not sleeping in a car tonight. Tessa pulled out her smartphone. She didn't dial security. She didn't dial the cleaning agency. She dialed a number saved in her favorites. Corporate Housing Partners. It was a service her company used to house visiting executives from Tokyo or London. I need a suite, she said into the phone, her tone leaving no room for argument. Tonight, right now. Yes, the one on 4th Avenue, the 2-bedroom with the kitchenette. Send the digital key to my phone, immediately. She hung up and looked at Donovan. I can't accept that, Donovan said, shaking his head vigorously. I can't pay you back. I can't. It's not a loan, Tessa cut him off. Consider it a bonus for the last 3 weeks of exceptional performance. Donovan blinked. A bonus? For cleaning? And an advance, Tessa added, her mind racing as she formulated a plan. On your new position. Donovan looked confused. New position? Tessa stood up. She wiped her face and regained her composure. The fixer was back, but this time she was fixing something that actually mattered. I realized tonight that I don't have a facilities manager, she lied. She didn't need one, but she would make the position exist by tomorrow morning. I need someone who notices when the heater is broken, someone who cares about the details, someone I can trust with the keys to my building. She looked Donovan in the eye. It comes with a salary, full benefits, and health insurance for Trey, starting tomorrow. Donovan sat there, stunned silence filling the room. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Trey, then back at Tessa. The stoic mask he had worn for months, the mask of the strong father who never lets his son see him sweat, finally broke. He buried his face in his rough hands and wept. The sound of a grown man crying is different from a child. It's not loud, it's not a tantrum. It's a deep, shaking release of pressure that has been building up for months. Donovan Banks, the man who had held it together through his wife's death, through eviction, through the freezing nights in a sedan, finally let go. The weight of the world had been on his shoulders, and for the first time in 6 months, someone had offered to help him carry it. Trey, seeing his father's shoulders shaking, climbed off his high stool. He wrapped his small arms around Donovan's neck, burying his face in his father's collar. "It's okay, Dad," his voice trembling slightly. "It's okay. Don't be sad. We can go back to the car. I don't mind the cold, I promise." Donovan took a ragged breath and pulled his son into a tight embrace. He kissed the top of his son's head, rocking him back and forth. "No, Trey," Donovan choked out, wiping his eyes with the rough fabric of his sleeve. "We aren't going back to the car. Not tonight." Tessa watched them, her own heart aching in her chest. She felt like an intruder on a private moment, yet she couldn't look away. She realized how close she had come to making a catastrophic mistake. If she had followed her business instincts, if she had stormed in there and fired him on the spot for stealing electricity, she would have sent this man and his child out into the freezing night with absolutely nothing. She would have destroyed them.
Donovan took a moment to compose himself. He took a deep breath, straightened his back, and looked at Tessa. His eyes were red, but the panic was gone. In its place was a look of profound, disbelief-filled gratitude. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice hoarse, "you don't know, you have no idea what this means. I was at the end of my rope." "You don't have to explain," Tessa said gently. "I do," Donovan insisted. "I need you to know. I'm not a charity case. I'm a worker. I've always worked. I hit a wall that I couldn't climb over." Tessa nodded. "I know, Donovan. I watched you tonight. I saw how you work. That's why I'm offering you the position. I'm not giving you a handout. I'm giving you an opportunity because you earned it." She looked down at her phone. The notification from the corporate housing partner pinged on her screen. "It's done," she said, holding up the phone. "The suite is on 4th Avenue. It's fully furnished. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a heater that works." Donovan looked at the phone as if it were a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. How do we get there?" he asked, dazed. "It's 2 blocks away," Tessa said. "Pack up your things, leave the cart. The night crew can finish the rest. Actually, never mind. You already finished everything." Donovan stood up. He moved with a new energy, a lightness that hadn't been there before. He began packing Trey's backpack, but this time he wasn't shoving things in with fear. He was packing with relief. "Come on, Trey," Donovan said, zipping up the boy's coat. "Put your hat on tight. We have a walk to do." "Are we going to sleep in a bed?" Trey asked, his eyes wide. "Yeah, buddy," Donovan smiled, and it was a real smile this time. A real bed with pillows and blankets. And at TV? Probably a TV too. Tessa stood up and walked to the door of the break room. "I'll walk you out." Before we see them walk out into that cold night, I want you to think about something. How many times have we judged someone for breaking the rules without asking if the rules were breaking them? Tessa thought Donovan was stealing from the company, but in reality he was stealing warmth to keep his son alive. It makes you wonder, who else around us is fighting a silent battle we can't see? If this story is touching your heart, and if you believe in the power of second chances, please subscribe to the channel. Join our community. We tell stories like this because we believe that understanding each other is the first step to helping each other.
Now let's see what happens when they finally leave that building. The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent, but it wasn't the awkward silence of strangers. It was a heavy, emotional silence. Tessa stood near the buttons. Donovan stood in the back holding Trey's hand so tight his knuckles were white. When the doors opened to the marble lobby, the night security guard, a man named Miller, looked up from his desk. He was surprised. He rarely saw the CEO this late, and he certainly never saw her walking out with the cleaning staff.
"Good night, Miss Caldwell," Miller said, eyeing Donovan suspiciously. "Good night, Miller," Tessa said sharply. "Donovan is with me. He's finished for the night." "Yes, ma'am," Miller nodded, retreating behind his desk. Tessa pushed open the heavy glass doors, and the wind hit them immediately. It was brutal. The wind howled down the canyon of skyscrapers, carrying the icy bite of the ocean. It whipped Tessa's hair across her face and made Trey gasp. But for the first time in weeks, Donovan didn't look terrified of the cold. He looked at it like it was a conquered enemy. They walked to the edge of the curb. The street lights reflected off the wet pavement, but the rain had stopped, leaving only the bitter freeze. Tessa pulled her hoodie tighter around herself. She turned to Donovan. "I forwarded the digital key to your phone number from the employee file," she said, shouting slightly over the wind. "Just scan it at the door. Room 402. Order room service. Put it on the company tab. Seriously, get him a hot meal." Donovan looked at his phone, seeing the confirmation code. He looked back at Tessa. The wind was stinging his eyes, making them water. Or maybe it was the emotion again. He took a step closer to her. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice low and serious, "I need to tell you something." "You don't have to." "I do," he interrupted. "You need to know what you really did tonight." He looked down at Trey, who was busy trying to catch his breath in the cold air, distracted by the city lights. Donovan leaned in closer so his son wouldn't hear. "I was going to give up," he whispered. "Frown? What do you mean?" "Tonight," Donovan said, staring at the concrete, "I was sitting in that closet while he read his book, and I was doing the math. I knew the temperature was dropping. I knew the car wouldn't hold the heat past 2 a.m. He looked up, his eyes dark with pain. "I was planning to drive him to the police station in the morning. I was going to tell them I abandoned him. I was going to give him up to the state, to foster care." Tessa gasped. "Donovan!" "I didn't want to," he said quickly. "It would have killed me. He's my life. But I thought, at least in foster care, he'd have a bed. He'd have heat. I thought I was failing him so badly that giving him away was the only way to save him." He wiped a tear that had escaped from his eyes. "I was going to say goodbye to him tomorrow morning. That's why I let him eat my dinner. I wanted his belly full one last time." Tessa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. She realized the precipice this man had been standing on. He had been hours away from making a decision that would have shattered his family forever. "You saved us," Donovan said, his voice breaking. "You didn't just give me a job. You kept my son with his father. You saved my family." Tessa reached out and, for the first time, touched his arm. It was a human connection, stripping away the titles of CEO and cleaner.
"No, Donovan," she said firmly. "A father who works all day and scrubs floors all night just to give his son 3 hours of warmth? You saved him. You saved him every single day. I just opened a door that should have never been closed to you." Donovan nodded, unable to speak. "Go," Tessa said softly. "Get him warm." Donovan stepped back. He gripped Trey's hand. "Say thank you to Miss Caldwell, Trey." Trey looked up, his nose pink from the cold. "Thank you for the warm room." "You're welcome, Trey," Tessa smiled. "Sleep tight." She watched them turn and walk down the sidewalk. The wind pushed against them, but they pushed back. Donovan walked a little taller. His stride was longer. He wasn't a man hiding in the shadows anymore. He was a father taking his son home. Tessa stood there until they turned the corner toward the hotel. She was freezing, shivering in her thin hoodie, but she didn't move. For the first time in years, she felt something warm in her chest. It wasn't the rush of closing a deal. It wasn't the satisfaction of a balanced budget. It was humanity. She turned back to her building, the glass tower that she owned. It looked different to her now. It wasn't just an asset. It was a shelter. And tomorrow she had work to do. Not firing people, but helping them. 2 days later, the sun broke through the gray Seattle clouds. The temperature was still freezing, but inside the Caldwell Marketing Group, something had shifted. At 9 a.m., the elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor. Usually, this was the time when junior executives rushed in with coffees, avoiding eye contact, focused entirely on their screens. But today, someone else walked out. Donovan Banks stepped onto the floor. He wasn't wearing the blue cleaning uniform. He wasn't pushing a yellow cart. He wasn't trying to make himself invisible. He was wearing a crisp white button-down shirt, dark slacks, and polished shoes. He looked like he belonged. He held a clipboard in one hand and a set of keys in the other. He walked with his head held high. The exhaustion that had etched deep lines into his face was gone. The dark circles under his eyes were lighter. He looked like a man who had slept in a bed for 2 nights straight, a man who had eaten a hot breakfast with his son. He stopped at the reception desk. The receptionist, Sarah, looked up surprised. She had seen him cleaning the trash cans for weeks, but she had never really seen him. "Good morning, Sarah," Donovan said, his voice clear and steady. "I noticed the heating vent in the conference room is rattling a bit before the 10 a.m. meeting." "Oh, thank you, Donovan. I didn't even notice." "Details matter," Donovan smiled. It was the same attention to detail that had kept his son warm in a supply closet. Now it was keeping the entire office running smoothly.
Tessa watched from her glass-walled office. She wasn't hiding in a hoodie anymore. She was back in her tailored suit, the CEO once again. But her eyes were softer. She wasn't just looking at spreadsheets. She was looking at people. She saw Donovan moving through the office with purpose. He greeted the IT guys by name. He held the door for an intern carrying too many boxes. He wasn't just a facilities manager. He was becoming the heart of the floor. Tessa walked out of her office and approached him. "How is the suite?" she asked quietly, so no one else could hear. Donovan turned to her. His face lit up. It's amazing, Miss Caldwell. Trey slept for 12 hours straight the first night. He didn't even wake up once. And the kitchen. I made him pancakes this morning. Real pancakes, not from a box." Tessa smiled. "And the car?" "Mechanic is fixing it right now," Donovan said, tapping his pocket where his first paycheck advance sat. "He said it'll be ready by Friday. But honestly, having a roof over our heads, knowing I can pay for it, it changes everything." He lowered his voice. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Thank you," Tessa replied, "for reminding me what actually matters." She looked around her office, the expensive furniture, the high-tech equipment. It was all just stuff. But the people were the real value. "Get back to work, Mr. Banks," she said playfully. "We have a building to run." "Yes, ma'am," Donovan nodded, a genuine grin spreading across his face. He walked down the hallway, checking the lights, checking the temperature, ensuring everything was perfect. But this time, he wasn't doing it out of fear. He was doing it out of pride. And somewhere in the city, a little boy named Trey was sitting in a warm classroom, his belly full of pancakes, knowing that tonight he wouldn't be sleeping in a frozen car. He would be sleeping in a bed, safe and sound, because his father never stopped fighting for him. Tessa Caldwell thought she was catching a thief. Instead, she caught a hero. Donovan's story reminds us of a powerful truth. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The person bagging your groceries might be worried about eviction. The person cleaning your office might be saving every penny for a child's medicine. The person sitting next to you on the bus might just be one paycheck away from losing everything. We are so quick to judge. We see a rule being broken and we assume the worst. But sometimes breaking the rules is the only way a good person can survive a broken system. Tessa could have fired Donovan. She could have called the police.
She could have followed the policy, and if she had, a little boy would have ended up in foster care and a loving father would have been destroyed. Instead, she chose kindness. She chose to listen. She chose to look past the uniform and see the human being underneath. And that choice didn't just save a family, it saved her own humanity. So, here is my challenge to you today. Be kind, always. Look a little closer. Listen a little longer. And when you have the power to help someone, even in a small way, do it. Because you never know when your kindness might be the thing that saves a life. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder of the good in the world.
And if you believe in the power of fathers who sacrifice everything for their children, type "Kindness Matters" in the comments below. Let's flood the comments with positivity today. Don't forget to subscribe to True Black Tales for more real stories about resilience, hope, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Until next time, stay warm, stay kind, and keep fighting.